Well, first, thanks. The comments are terrific. And if I were giving the paper tomorrow, I would have all night to think about them. And I might know something better to say than what I'm going to say. So first, thanks for the comments. And I think I want to take them in the order in which, because they're stored that way maybe, in which they came at me. And so first, with regard to Nick's criticism of the way in which I formulated the closure principles, since he agreed with a lot of what I said, I'm going to agree with a lot of what he said. I think he's right that the way in which I formulated those principles doesn't capture everything one would want to capture with a correctly formulated principle. In some cases, the principles are way too weak, and in some cases, the principle that I formulated was too strong. And if you look at his, I guess, preferred suggested repairs, one of them is the CKK, another is the bottom CPI. Yeah. And what I want to say about the reason, I wish this had been such a really conscious thought, but what I tried to do was to give the closure principles in the way that would be best from the skeptic's point of view. So I was thinking of this as a dialectical situation, and I, for example, think that he's absolutely right that that the notion of S as being in a position to know something is a very fuzzy, foggy notion, better be spelled out more than I did. And I was, in a sense, willing to let the skeptic mean whatever they wanted. And so, for example, a reason that I didn't want to take the CPI way of formulating it, if S knows that X, and S invariably, and S validly infers Y from X, then S knows that Y. That states a kind of epistemic priority between X and Y that I thought the skeptic need not be committed to. That looks like it's limiting us to the past, what I was calling the past one kind of case, and I would take it that the skeptic might want to avail him or herself of path 1 and 2 and 3 as a possible relationship between the propositions. With regard to CKK, if S knows that X, and S knows that X entails Y, then S knows that Y. I still think you have to have in a position to know that Y in that one as well. I mean, I could be epistemically perverse and not draw the conclusions to which I'm entitled. In fact, I could deny that Y. I could be epistemically timid and think, also perversely, and think, look, I know that X, and I know that X entails Y, but I've got to have 2 entailing reasons before I go for it, or something like that. And so I do agree that the way in which I formulated these principles may not be, these principles may be false, but notice I was willing to grant the truth of the principles. The structure of the argument was, okay, let's grant it. And so I wanted to have as little as possible in the antecedent and as much as possible in the consequent of these principles so that they could get the most out of a little. And so that was the strategy. But I certainly agree that these corrections are important, and the principles, as I stated it, didn't work. And now, with regard to the history of skepticism and how my comments fit into it. And I want to say a couple words about the Neo and the Wittgenstein part and the Wittgenstein part, and then something a little bit about Descartes, and then something about what the structure of my argument was. I did put the neo in there because it isn't the same thing. But here's a quote from Uncertainty. Now I know it's not like the Bible in some senses, but it's like the Bible in one sense. You could probably find anything in there you want. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but at this moment it's a good thing. So here is what one passage from paragraph 519 in Uncertainty. And I agree, maybe even my interpretation of this passage isn't right, but here's what he says. Admittedly, if you're obeying the order, bring me a book, you may have to check whether the thing you see over there really is a book. But then at least you know what people mean by book. And if you don't, you can look it up. But then you must know what some other words mean. And the fact that a word means such and such is used in such and such a way is in turn an empirical fact, like the fact that what you see over there is a book. Therefore, in order for you to be able to carry out an order, there must be some empirical fact about which you are not in doubt. Doubt itself rests only on what is beyond doubt. But since a language game is something that consists of recurrent procedures of the game in time, it seems impossible to say that any individual case that such and such must be beyond doubt if there is to be a language game, though it is right enough to say that as a rule, some empirical judgment or other must be beyond doubt. Now, I take it that one thing that's going on there is that you're saying at a certain stage in the evolution of the language game, I was calling them occasions, something is bedrock. But it may not be bedrock the next time we play the game or as the game develops. And so the neo-Wittgensteinian point here was that what's bedrock is occasion relative. At 625, he says it even more tersely. A doubt without an end is not even a doubt. Now to a slightly more serious matter, because I don't want to pretend to say that, forget the word neo-Wittgensteinian, it's my view. I didn't say or argue that the skeptical hypothesis was logically impossible. What I did argue was that if SK were true, then there would be no evidence of its truth. And I didn't say that SK wasn't possible. I grant that SK is possibly true. The mere possibility of its truth, but I claim that the mere possibility of its truth doesn't make an alternative that I have to take seriously. But Smith thinks, I suppose, that it is possible to doubt all propositions at once, so to speak. And I think some passages in Descartes make it look like, well, not make it look like, he claims that's what he's doing. Here's what he says in the seventh reply. He says, suppose an inquirer had a basket full of apples, and being worried that some of the apples were rotten, wanted to take out the rotten ones to prevent the rot spreading. You see, you have these false beliefs in there that you want to get rid of. How would he proceed? Would he not begin by tipping the whole lot out of the basket, and would not the next step be to cast his eye over each apple in turn and pick up and put back in the basket only those he saw to be sound, leaving the others? In just the same way, those who have never philosophized correctly have various opinions in their minds, which they have begun to store up since childhood, and which they therefore have reason to believe may in many cases be false. They then attempt to separate the false beliefs from the others, so as to prevent their contaminating the rest and making the whole lot uncertain. Now, the best way they can accomplish this is to reject all their beliefs together in one go, as if they were all uncertain and false. They can then go over each belief in turn and readopt only those which they recognize to be true and indubitable. So there's a person who really has got this picture in mind. We're going to doubt them all, and all at once, or throw them out, and then the question. But let me remind you what happens in the third meditation, where the primary grounds for doubt, the strongest ground for doubt, remember the hyperbolic metaphysical doubt, he appeals appeals to a bunch of propositions that are beyond doubt. He says, now it is manifest by the natural light that there must be at least as much reality in the efficient and total cause as in its effect. That never got doubted, ever. And of course he has to hold that there are causes of his ideas. I mean, when you get the argument going, you have to think, well, not only can't there be more reality in the effect than there is in the cause, ideas are the kinds of things that are caused. They're either, well, you know the story about the three kinds of ideas. He also appeals in the third meditation. He says, thus the light of nature causes me to know clearly that the ideas in me are like pictures or images, which can, in truth, easily fall short of the perfection from which they have been derived, but can never contain anything greater or more perfect. This is not homonym, I realize, but Descartes taken as the paradigm case of this skeptic, and all I'm saying is he didn't really do what he said he was going to do. He kept a bunch of apples in there that he didn't throw out on the ground. In other words, I take it that the bedrock propositions in the meditations are the propositions revealed by the light of nature. Now, in the updated evil genius argument, the Biv argument, I think has the same structure. I claim that if the Biv hypothesis were true, there could be no empirical reason for thinking it to be true. I also went overboard and said there couldn't be any empirical reason for anything, and he's certainly right. I do, if there is a scar, or if I see what appears to be a scar, and that was, it would appear that that follows regularly from somebody being wounded, then I could form that kind of judgment. The question is, could I have any reason for thinking that I'm a Biv? And what Professor Smith says is, yes, I could, because I could claim, look, human beings are these kinds of creatures that have this rather meager input and this torrent of output. But of course, if the Biv hypothesis were true, I've never experienced human beings. I mean, if I'm a Biv, I've never seen human beings. I don't know anything about human beings. If the Biv hypothesis were true, I have no reason for believing that. So I don't think one can appeal to that kind of evidence as evidence or reasons, that kind of evidence for the Biv hypothesis. Finally, I did say that I was willing to grant to the skeptic that something's a relevant alternative or an alternative I have to take seriously to eliminate only if there's the slightest doubt, the slightest ground for thinking it's true, the slightest bit of evidence. I didn't say that was a sufficient condition. I just said that was a necessary condition. And so there could be, in ordinary cases, much stronger criteria that one would use. But again, I wanted to grant to the skeptic as much as I possibly could. And so I was willing to say to the skeptic, okay, I'll take it seriously if you can give me the slightest reason for believing I'm a Biv. You don't have to make it very plausible. You don't have to make it even close to being equal to my reason for thinking I have a hand. Just give me some reason. And my claim was they couldn't do it. And in actual cases, in cases of ordinary doubt, suppose we're looking at Gretzky's zebras in the zoo. And someone says, how do you know they're not a collection of the ghosts of Portuguese queens who've disguised themselves as zebras? Now, I suppose it's logically possible that there are ghosts of Portuguese queens who've managed to figure out how to disguise themselves as zebras. But I don't have to take that one seriously because I've got no reason for thinking it's true. And unless I have a reason for thinking that they're cleverly disguised mules, I don't think I have to take that one seriously either. Now, if I know the zookeeper is a drunk and has occasionally let the zebras out of the pen, and in order to cover this up, has painted some mules, okay, then I've got some reason to believe these might be cleverly disguised mules. But you just pull it from the air. I don't think I have any obligation to consider it seriously. Finally, with regard to Tito's comments, the comments were raised because I incautiously put a footnote, a very last footnote in the paper that said, look, if I've shown, I didn't say if, but Stu's sitting here, so if I've shown that the easy knowledge problem doesn't arise from closure, I have a hunch that the same kind of thing can work for bootstrapping. And Pseudo's point is, no, it isn't going to work, because the problems are different kinds of problems. The closure problem is a first-level knowledge problem, and the bootstrapping problem is a second-level knowledge problem. How do I know that my knowledge was produced reliably? How do I know that I know? Okay, I'm going to do it. I have some thoughts about the bootstrapping problem, but they're more offhand or off the top of my head than the thoughts in the paper. But here goes. I think if you think of knowledge as arising when we have defeasible but undefeated reasons, then you have a way of approaching the bootstrapping problem and showing that it's not really all that serious. Okay, there goes. Think of it in a third-person case. I want to find out whether Tito's beliefs are reliable. Well, I can know when he believes that something is red. He tells me he acts as though it's red. I'd use all the third-person criteria for determining when he has a belief. And I can also figure out when the thing is red. I just look at it. And I say, gee, he's pretty reliable. Generally, when it's red, he comes to believe it's red, or turn the safety condition, make it when he believes it's red, it is red. So I can figure out with regard to him that his beliefs are reliable. Now, the bootstrapping problem looks like it's much more serious for me, because how do I know that my beliefs are reliable and reliably formed? I don't think there's a problem. I know what I believe. I can introspect. And sometimes I realize sometimes introspection about what my beliefs are is misleading. I can believe I have a belief and I'm wrong. So I could, to myself, I could do the same thing that I could do for some other person. I believe that my wife loves me and would never cheat on me. I say that to myself. And then I find myself hiring private detectives and doing all this kind of stuff. I may say, well, I thought I believed it, but I didn't really believe that. I'm a very suspicious guy. But let's grant that I have ways of finding out what I believe. And I think I have those ways. Maybe not as reliable, frankly, as the ways I have of finding out what he believes. Because, there's much more ground for self-deception here. But grant me that I can find out my beliefs. I think I can also find out when things are red. I can look at them. It's not as though, the way sometimes people think of the bootstrapping problem, at least the way I think they think of it, is something like this. I want to find out how much gas there is in the tank. And my only access to that is by looking at the gauge. Now, how could I find out that the gauge is reliable if I don't have access to the tank as well as the gauge, because I have to match the two? Well, I'm claiming I can do that very thing. If something looks red, then that's a very good reason for coming to believe that it is red. It's not an entailing reason, it's a defeasible reason, but I think I can find out when things are... My evidence that it's red is not that I believe that it's red. My evidence that it's red is that it looks red. That's how it appears. I have a red appearing sensation, or whatever, if you want to be that kind of foundationalist. But I think I have access to the fact that it's red and what my beliefs are. So I don't think it's at all mysterious that I can find out that my beliefs are reliable. I can pair them up. It is red, and lo and behold, I believe it's red. I don't find that at all mysterious. So I don't think it's a level, a move up to another level. I think it's just, I come to find what my beliefs are, I come to find that the thing is red, and they coincide. Now, not always. Sometimes I find I believe it's red and it isn't red, and I can find out those cases, and I can figure out when I'm suffering from illusion. So, now that was a hunch. So don't, hunches are not well confirmed or well argued hypotheses. They're just hunches.